Welcome to the 21st video in the playlist Leetcode Top Interview 150 questions. In this video, we will be solving the question reverse words in a string. It is given that we have an input string and we have to reverse the order of the words. So let's say if the input string is the sky is blue. So here what we want to do is we want to have blue first, then is first, then sky first, and then the first. So one thing to notice is that it is not asking to reverse the individual word, but what it is doing it is asking to reverse the order in which the words appear. So here in the input, the appears before sky, sky before appears before is appears before blue. So in the output, blue appears before is appears before sky, sky appears before the. Now, my approach for solving this problem would be very similar to what we used to solve the longest common prefix problem in the previous video, where we were iterating the string from the last index, and every time we encounter a word, we used to store that state in a Boolean variable. So have a state variable to store if we have encountered a word. Now, in the previous problem, what we were doing is every time we were seeing a space when we have already seen a word, we were terminating the function. But in this problem, we keep going on, and every time we see a space when we have already seen a word, so we basically extract the word and move it to the front of the result string. So the way this will work is, first we start iterating over this string with cursor here. So we will keep going on and keep adding the words to the buffer. Now, the moment we encounter a space, so we know that the buffer has a word now. So what we do is we create a result buffer and we reverse the string in this buffer. So if we reverse this string, it will be blue, and then we append a space. Then we keep going forward in this, and eventually we will reach another word. So the moment we reach a space between two words, we mark the state variable that we are not seeing a word anymore. So state becomes false. The moment we see a character again while iterating backwards, we mark the state as again true. We clear the buffer and we start appending what the word is there in the current cursor. So again we will encounter this space. So we will go back and we will reverse the word in the buffer. So this reverse will be is, and then we append the result to the result buffer and append a space. Similarly, we keep going back. We encounter a space again, so we have to reset the value to false. Then again we encounter the cursor over here, which is a character, and with the state is false. So we have to again set the state to true, and in the buffer start appending the characters. So this cursor will read all these values. Now in the buffer, we again encounter a space. Finally, when the cursor reaches here, we have to reverse the characters in the buffer. So let's do that and append a space to the result. And finally, we do the same thing for the. We mark this as false. Then we keep going backwards. We add the letters in the reverse order to the buffer. And then finally, we have reached the end of the array. So now, since we are only doing it every time we are seeing a word state as true and encountering a space, then we were reversing the words in the buffer and adding it to the result array. But for this corner case, this loop will exit here. So we will have to have one more check that if our temporary buffer is not empty, then we have to reverse the word in the list and append it to the result. So we're going to do that. So we'll do that. We'll reverse and add to the result. Additionally, we have one more corner case here, which is if the string is like this. So in that case, we will append the space at the end of the result buffer, but we should trim the string from the corner. So before returning the result, we will reduce the buffer size by 1 and then return the result so that we can cover this corner case. So let's go ahead and write the code for this approach. So string builder result is new string builder, and we are going to make a Boolean variable to denote if we have seen a word or not. Initially, this will be false. Now we start iterating from the back of the string. So for int I is s.length -1, I is greater than equal to 0, and I minus minus. Now one more thing is that we are always reversing a single word whenever we have some word in the buffer and we see a space. So let me just quickly write a utility function called reverse. So reverse word. So this function is going to reverse whatever we pass in the string as. Let's create a string builder. And let's start iterating over s from behind. So int I is equal to s.length -1, I is greater than equal to 0, I minus minus, and builder.append s.character at I. Now we return builder.toString. So this is a simple utility function we will be using to reverse a single word fully. Let's start iterating over this string and look at the scenarios which we will encounter while iterating over the string from behind. So one common scenario which you can see is you can have trailing spaces. So let's handle that. So if is word sequence is false and s dot character at I is a space. So this means that this is a trailing space and we don't have encountered any word while processing the string yet. So in this case, we just have to ignore the trailing space. So we do a continue. Else if it's not a word sequence yet and s dot character at I is not equal to a space. So in this case, we know that it's not a space, but it's the first character we have encountered. So we have to set the word sequence to true. And then we also need a buffer to store this immediate word. So let's define the temporary buffer again here. And here, let's say temp buffer is new string builder, because every time we encounter a new word, we have to reset our temporary buffer. And then temp buffer dot append as dot character at I. So we are adding the character which we are seeing in the temporary buffer. So this will start forming the glue word in the reverse order. Now, the next condition is if it is an ongoing word sequence and the character at I is not a space. This means we are still in the middle of the word. So what we have to do is any character we see, we just keep appending to the buffer. So temp buffer dot append s dot character at I. Now the final condition is if it is a word sequence and s dot character of I is a space. So in this case, we know that we have finished processing a single word and now we have a space. So first we can mark that is word sequence is now false. And then we have to use this utility function to reverse the word in the temporary buffer and append it to the main result. So let's say result.append, and then we call reverse word and pass temp buffer dot to string. And finally, in our approach, we said we have to add a space after we are appending the word to the result to accumulate for this space. So result.append space. Now once we have completed reading the word, we can also reset the temporary buffer here. So temp buffer is new string builder. Now let's handle the corner cases where after processing the string, if our temporary buffer is not empty, so we have to consider that scenario. So if our temp buffer is not empty, in that case we have to append the result again with whatever the contents in the temp buffer is remaining. So reverse word of temp buffer dot to string, and it's safe to return the result here. And the final case is if we had a string like this where we have trailing space in the front. So for that, we can just say that the result we are returning has one extra space at the end. So we can just say result.set length result.length minus 1, and then return result.to string. So this is what the code should look like for the approach we discussed for reverse words in a string. So let's try to take a look at the code once and then try to run the test cases. So here, this should be actually string builder, not buffer. So let's update that. And now we can run our test cases. So we can see all the test cases are passing. So let's go ahead and try to submit the solution. And we are able to get an accepted solution for the question reverse words in a string. In the next video, we will be solving the 22nd problem from the Leetcode Top Interview 150 list.